Is live before we jump into tonight's session. So just bear with me a minute. I'll just make sure that all the streams are working, that we're live everywhere we should be, and then we'll start. If you're joining me tonight, great to see you. Do let me know where you're joining from in the chat. That will be awesome. I can see some people are joining already, so that's great. So Steve's here and Jim's here and Michelle's got to jump out. This will be on replay today, so you can jump back in. I think it's up to 30 days afterwards on the live. So do feel free to ask questions in the chat. I'm going to start in about 2 to 3 minutes. Hi, Helena. Welcome. I can see the chat here, so if you want to ask questions, you're welcome to jump in. And today's session is all about building your personal brand, and we're going to look at why is it important, why does it matter. We've got about 6 or 7 questions I'm going to answer in today's session, of course, as well as your questions. So hi, Simon. So we're going to start in about 1 more minute. We'll just wait for the notifications to kick in. Hi, Debbie. Hi, Kashif. So what we're going to look at is, what is a personal brand? Let's make it real. What does that mean if you're not Richard Branson, and if you're not, somebody from Dragon's Den? What does that really mean? And then what's some of the steps you can take to actually build it? Hi, Vimbe as well. So there's a good few people joining in now, which is brilliant. I'll just wait for a few more. Beatrice is here. Awesome. So this is what we're going to cover, and I'd love to hear from you all joining tonight about your questions about personal branding. What have you been struggling with? And there's some myths I want to bust about it, because a lot of people think they need a big following. They need to be published in magazines. They think there's a lot to do to build a brand. Debbie, yes, we are recording the session. And if you revisit the event, you'll be able to come back to the video. But I think it's only for a limited time. I think LinkedIn archives it after a particular time. So wherever you're joining from, just an intro to this session. This session's hosted by OXLEP, which is the Oxfordshire Local Enterprise Partnership. So if you're a business based in Oxfordshire, there is support for you, grants and programs that will help you. Particularly now, we're having we come out of one challenge and go into another one. There's lots of support in Oxfordshire through the Local Enterprise Partnership, including on the website. There is a diagnostic tool that will help you understand what's available for you. What are the areas that you need help with? So this event's totally free. It's funded by OXLEP to help businesses. And of course, if you're joining us from outside of Oxford, you're welcome to stay around. That's absolutely fine. But if you want to access the funding, you have to be in Oxfordshire. If you want to access the support, you have to be in Oxfordshire. Okay, brilliant. So we've got a nice little crowd here with us today, which is awesome. So I've got a chat here, so I can see people jumping in. And what I want to cover today is really, I've got a few questions. That's really all I'm going to share, and then I'm going to give you the answers. So it's real simple tonight. So let's just have a look at this for a moment, and I'll keep flicking to the Q&A. Just bear with me 1 second. There's a little glitch with the stream, which I will make sure that works for us. Yeah, there we go. So there's really 5 questions I want to cover, and any questions you have, right? Now, I'm not talking tonight about becoming, getting on the front page of the Times or Time magazine here. That's not what we're about. I'm looking at this from you're a business owner, you're a professional in your field, and you want to establish your personal reputation. What people think about you, what people's perception about you is whilst you're not in the room. I'm going to talk about why you need one, why the world is changing, and why personal branding is becoming more important, even if you're just looking to change career. It's massively changed the way things are going. And I'll also talk about how this has changed the way we're recruiting as well. So a lot of changes in recruitment around personal branding as well. And I'll share some stories of some of the major companies and how they're using personal branding on their employees. Then we need to understand, okay, if I want to build a personal brand, with whom? Who do you want to have that lasting message? Because very often when we jump into this personal branding stuff, some people inadvertently build the wrong personal brand. And so we're going to look at what's the goal of your personal brand, what do you want to achieve with it, what matters to that audience, so you know that you're talking to them at the right level, and we're going to break that down. And then, of course, where should you start? Some of the key actions you can do and take away from tonight's session. So that's really what we're going to cover. I'm just going to keep an eye on the chat just to make sure everybody can see the slides and all that kind of stuff. We had a really interesting and funny glitch a couple of weeks ago, whereby in the middle of the live, my camera just died. So I'm just a little apprehensive today because it's been a little while since I've done a live and made sure all the tech's working. So, okay, so first question is, what is a personal brand? What is it? Now, I put a definition here, but it's real simple. It's the perception you create and the impression you leave. Now, perception often has a very negative connotation of, in politics, we see politicians saying things that are a bit over-egged, spin as we call it. I'm not talking about saying things that aren't true, but I'm talking about how can I take responsibility for how my target audience are seeing me. How can I take responsibility for how they're seeing me? So that's not just about what I want to say. It's about how I'm perceived. So it's not about what I tell people to think, or it's not about what I put out there. It's how other people see it. So it's the perception I create. In other words, what am I doing? What's my efforts to go out to the market to help people have a perception of me, an understanding of me that fits with what I want to achieve? That's the first part of it. Then the second part of it is I can create the perception, but what's the impression I leave behind? So you can have a fantastic personal brand, but if it's disconnected from you, your personality, and all of those things, what happens is people have a disjointed understanding of who you are. So it takes some time, but what we're trying to do is shape how people view us. What's the way we want to be perceived? And then make sure that that perception lines up with real life. So, it is a case of, aligning two elements together, that what we put out in our media to build that perception and the real life line up. And that's important, because if they don't line up, you could leave people shortchanged. Yeah. But also, if you line them up well, people who see you, say, on social media will also love you in person. And that's where you can start to build, and it's a cheesy way of putting it, I know, but what we call a tribe or a fan base. Fan base seems a little silly in a business context, but you do get people who really love what you do and will champion it and support it and value what you do. And that's what I mean by a fan base or a champion. They literally advocate for you. So it's really important that that perception we create and the reality of us as a human being line up. Because when we don't, what happens is we create two personas. We create the persona for the public, but you can't hold that up. You can't sustain that because it's not really you. So the idea is not to kind of conform to the way other people have built their brand and say, oh, I must do it like that. It's to do it in your own way that fits your personality, because it is a personal brand. So it's as much about your identity, your way of thinking, the way you want to present yourself, and your knowledge and expertise and know-how and experience. It's all of those things together. So often, in the teaching sector, in the education sector, in the public speaking world, people don't just hire people for their information. They hire it for the way that they get to the point, the way they achieve the result. So perception and impression they're two different things, but they achieve the same goal. So let's just have a look and make sure everybody's still here chatting. Brill. So you're all still here, which is great. I just keep flicking back to the chat just to make sure there's any questions. So that's what it's really about. Now, why do you need one? Why can't you just do your thing? I don't need to do all this stuff these days. I'm just doing what I'm doing and people will recognize me for it or they won't. Well, we're kind of living in a time where if you don't have a personal brand, it can actually go against you. Now, I'm not saying that this is the case immediately right now, but more and more people from, say, younger generations have grown up in a social media world where they share what they think, they go live, they do all of this stuff. And of course, everything that we do, creates a perception. Everything we do creates a perception. And so if you look, lots of organizations, lots of individuals spend a lot of time trying to shape the world how they're seen, but also shout above that noise, show that they're different to everybody else. And so if you think about it, you've got like this baseline of people are doing things in the public space far more than they've ever done before. And so not having a personal brand can be just as damaging as having a bad one, because you're invisible and there's no point of difference. And to some degree, sadly, when we think about how our world works with social media, there's a lot of buzzwords going around, a lot of snippets and all that kind of stuff. And if you don't have a personal brand, if you don't invest time in building one, you are allowing the market, the world around you to define you based on their own perceptions. So I've got a really good quote, which is here. It's not a really good quote, but it does explain it. Personal branding is about managing your name. Even if you don't own a business, in a world of misinformation, and that's true, isn't it? We live in a time now where it's more difficult to tell what is true and what isn't, that we're making an effort to set our own stall out with people and say, this is who I am, this is what I'm about. So it's not just a case of, posing and putting quotes on social media. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about creating or putting a message out to the world so that people go, I know what Dean's about. I know what he does. I know how he can help me, and I trust him. Trust him. Personal branding is one of the easiest ways to build trust. You might not agree with me in terms of that it should be, but actually in a world where you can make a business and make a website in 5 minutes, actually building that personal brand is an advantage. So why do you need one? In a world where anything can happen really quickly, you need to be setting your stall out and visible, not just for now, but for the long term, so that you are a trusted person in the marketplace. You have a track record and you've taken a deliberate action to form that perception, that impression, that reputation. Now, let's just have a look at another question here. So this is why it's important. Yeah. Now, just before I move on, lots of companies, bigger companies, are now realizing how big personal branding is. And so it's becoming more and more a part of people's hiring decisions. So, for an example, say, in the old days, the 80s and 90s, when people were selling, people were hired for their black book or their Rolodex. Yeah. And some people on this session tonight will go, what's a Rolodex? But they were hired for their Rolodex, their network. And oddly enough, now more and more companies are aligning and hiring people based on their network, their reach, who they know, how that company can benefit from having that personal brand in their business. And that works similarly with suppliers and clients. They do the same thing. And I was talking to two big brands, one in the marketing space across the world. Actually, they're a major technology provider for marketing agencies and marketing people. And I was talking to a major fizzy drinks manufacturer. I won't say the name. And both of them said, when we're looking now, we're looking for who's got a network, who's coming in, who can really amplify the brand, who can personify the brand, even if they're coming in and they're just, an admin assistant or they're a factory worker. They're mindful that if people have got an audience, if they've got a crowd, they want to integrate that into part of their role. And you'll see on things like TikTok and Instagram and other channels, podcasts, all of these places, you'll see people leveraging their brand as part of their career. So more and more that's happening. More and more people are doing that. More and more people are seeing that they can open up more opportunities by being a personality. Now, that doesn't mean you need thousands of followers. It just means you need to influence the right community. So for you and your goal, which we're going to look at your goals in a moment, you might not have a big, massive goal with your personal brand. Your goal might only be that, you want 1 or 2 clients a month and you want your personal brand to help you elevate you outside of the competition. So you might not need a huge personal brand with hundreds of thousands of followers. You just might need to establish your personal brand with 200 people or 50 people. So what I'm saying is you don't need millions of followers. You don't need to do all that stuff. You just need the right people to know what you're about. If people who are irrelevant to you don't know who you are, don't know what you stand for, it doesn't matter. Whatever you take from tonight, if you go and build your personal brand and we never meet ever again, and you build it for your 200 people, that's awesome. It doesn't matter whether I know you or not. It's only about the people who need to know you, the people who need to see that you're a trusted expert, the people who need to see that you are credible, the people who need to see that you are a solution provider for them. That's really all you need. So it doesn't need to be thousands and thousands of people. It could be 50 people. Now, obviously, the bigger the crowd, the more influence you have, but actually the principles work whatever size of audience. There are some people, and this is fascinating, who have built a personal brand on Facebook. And you go onto Facebook and you go into a group, say, on Facebook, and there's, say, 5,000 people in the group. And they are a big deal in that group. Big deal. They dominate that group. Everybody knows what they're about. They respond to them. They engage with them. But when you come outside of that group, nobody knows them. They're like a complete stranger. Is that bad? Not really. If they're achieving their objectives with their personal brand, it doesn't matter that the rest of the world doesn't know who they are. It doesn't matter at all. So really simple stuff. You need one. The world is going that way, and so it would be dangerous to ignore that that's the case. So we've got some questions here. So let me just come up. So Helen, how do you gauge the perception you create and the impression you leave? I think one of the things that you have to do, how do you gauge it, is, well, we'll come to the implementation in a minute. I think you can only gauge it by, the first one is, the easiest way to gauge it is to look at how people respond to your content and who responds to your content. So let's say you're producing a podcast, and you target the podcast for small business owners in Oxfordshire. Okay, your job is to then see, am I getting the right level of people coming to that? Am I getting the right people there? The other thing that you can do by gauging it is tricky, and Catherine said doing a survey. I've done a survey recently, and I asked an open-ended survey and I asked 3 or 4 questions, which were checkbox. And then I asked 2 open questions. And I asked, who do you think I serve? Yeah, in other words, who do you think I help? And then what do you think I do? And ask people to answer that in their own words. And when they did that, obviously it gave me a sense of it. So Catherine, that's a good point. Scary, absolutely. Anytime you put yourself out there, it's scary. The reason being is not everybody's going to agree with you. And some people will disagree with you. Some people will just be prickly and rude, but you're not doing it for them. You're doing it for them 50, 60, however many people. So in the short term, you can't gauge it. What you can do is see how your message is responding and sense check to go, am I staying on topic, and am I getting the feedback on the content that I'm putting out, whether it's a podcast, an email newsletter, social media posts, whether networking. And one of the ways that we do that, and I'll come to this in a bit more detail in a minute, is we have to make sure we've got our personal strapline. Now, it takes some time to create this, but what you need to do in one way or another, create your personal strapline. Now, I'm going to show you a method of doing the personal strapline in a second, and I'll pull it up on screen. But we got another question? No? I thought it was another question. But it is something you have to build over time. But your personal strapline, and I'm going to use a controversial example here, but your personal strapline, think about some of the elections we've had and the referendums we've had in times, over the last 5-6 years. And I'm not going to say what they are because I don't want to provoke or create an issue. But some of the reasons why those campaigns were successful was because one line punched through all of the noise. So when we're talking about the perception and creating it, one of the things you have to do is really come up with what you would call your elevator pitch. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a type of elevator pitch that you can use, which will help you. I'll just pull it up. I'll just pull it up for you. Just bear with me while I just switch screens, and I'll show you this. It sounds like, Catherine, you got a really good result from yours. So let me just share this screen, and we'll come back to the presentation. So this is an article I wrote about this very issue a couple of weeks ago, and I'm happy to share the link in the chat if you want it. So let me just paste that in the chat. Well, actually, I'm pasting it from my colleague's profile because we're going live on a page here. So in the Theaddy pitch is a very simple way to help you land a message quickly, personal strapline. So the Theaddy pitch was developed by an Australian marketer many years ago, and it was designed for an elevator pitch. You know, you're in an elevator with a decision maker, you've got 30 seconds, you've got to tell people what you do and get on and move on. And he created this formula that has been used very widely and is still used today. And I'm going to show you the way it works. And this is how simple it is. So the first section of the Theaddy pitch is, you know how, target audience, and state problem. You know how, target audience, and state problem. That's the first element of it. Then the second element is what we do, or what you do, or what I do, is achieve an outcome and put the feelings on it. That's effectively how you can craft very quickly that personal statement, that strap line, that line that tells you who you are. Now, one of the adaptations that people do with this is they actually write, I help target audience with this problem achieve and a feeling. So I'll show you an example of this, but this is a very common, very familiar way that this process is used. So we do, you know how, target audience, and state problem. What I do is outcome, or result, and feelings. And then once you've done that part, you go, just recently, I helped, and that's an example, a relevant example for the target audience with the stated problem looking to achieve the results. Now, whether you're a professor in a university, a small business owner, a virtual assistant, a CEO of a global company, this is the message you want to get across. So wherever you are using content, whether it's LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, podcasts, email marketing, whatever you're doing to communicate with your target audience, this statement should be there. And I'm going to use one of the politically divisive statements, but it worked and it was simple. It wasn't necessarily, I'm not going to kind of get into the politics of it, but the way the message was crafted was clever in that one of the messages in the 2016 referendum that punched through all the noise that was left in people's minds, what the perception was created was that if you voted to leave, if you voted in 2019 for Boris Johnson, they'd get Brexit done. Now, we're not going to get into the politics. What I'm trying to talk about is the message was so simple, so clear, everybody could remember it. Everybody could, and that's all they talked about. They just kept reiterating it over and over and over and over and over and over. And so part of that repetition of a key statement, seeing it over again, reinforcing it through whatever content you're using in your marketing machine, will actually land that for you. You've probably seen this in conversations. As a real simple example, you'll be talking to somebody and you'll use a particular phrase. So you'll use like, oh, you'll use a particular phrase to describe something. And what happens is the other person picks up on the phrase. It's a very common way to basically create a culture around language and how people perceive things by just repeating key messages. Yeah, this is what marketers do. If you look at Coca-Cola, that's what they do all day long. They show you a great lifestyle drinking Coca-Cola. And so somewhere in the back of our heads, we have this perception that if you drink Coca-Cola, you have the perfect body and you'll live an amazing life. Yeah, somewhere in the back of our heads, that seed has been planted. So this repetition is important. And the Gaddy pitch is just a way to structure that. And then once you've made it this way, of course, you can craft it any way you want. But one of the hardest things about creating that personal statement is simply being able to come up with a way to express it yourself. So the Gaddy pitch may not be your final way of wording it, but it will certainly open up an opportunity of a way to communicate it. So the Gaddy pitch has been around for a long time. It works still to this day. I'll just show you an example. So this is an example I've written. You know how solopreneurs and small business owners struggle to market and sell themselves. What I do is give them straightforward strategies they can implement so they feel confident to take action. Just recently, I shared a simple social media commenting strategy with a solopreneur who sells her expertise to startups. She implemented the strategy and picked up a 40K client. I have, in seconds, given you my Gaddy pitch. Now, could I rework this? Could I improve it? Yes, and I can condense it down, and I can also put it in my headers on my social media. I can put it on my website so that people really, everywhere they go, they see this is what I'm about. It's as much about me choosing to repeat. And there's a really good saying, I can't remember where I picked it up from. About the time you're getting sick of saying something, your target audience are just realizing that's what you're saying. So we tire of repeating things. We tire of saying the same things very early, whereas our target audience need to hear it multiple times. Sometimes people say, actually, what you need to do is they need to hear it about 21 times to really let it sink in. So imagine you say something 7 times, yeah, and then all of a sudden you go, oh, I can't be bothered saying that again. And people lose it. People don't even grasp it. You look on YouTube, a lot of YouTube videos, they start with an intro. They say, in this video, I'm going to do da-da-da. And then they go, hi, I'm such and such, and this is what I do, and this is how I help. Then they go into the video because they want you to remember who they are and what they're about. So having this Gaddy pitch or a version of this condensed down and distributed everywhere will help you get that message out. So I'm going to show you this Gaddy pitch. Hopefully it's going to show up on screen. Let me just show you there. Yep, there it is. So you can see this is the example. Hopefully it's clear on screen and you can see how that works. So I'm just going to flick for a moment back to the slides. Everybody all right? Can everybody still see me and hear me and all of that fun stuff? So your goal, and it's really important you define your goal with your personal brand. And let me give you some reasons why. I spent some time with somebody who'd rightly positioned himself as a thought leader in his industry. And I went to see him, we sat down, and I said, you know, you must be doing really well. Your industry respects you. You're in magazines. You're commenting on articles. You know, you must be doing really, really well. And he said to me, no, I'm not. And I was like, what? And this was an eye-opener for me because I'd never thought about it like this, but maybe you haven't thought about this in this way either. So this client of mine wasn't doing very well in his business, but had a lot of respect in the industry, had a lot of people in the industry looking to him for insight and and knowledge, but very little business. And what we discovered is that, and this was one of my big lessons about personal branding, is there's a difference between thought leadership and market leadership. Thought leadership or industry leadership is often where you speak to people like you. So thought leadership and industry leadership, I want to be an industry leader, it sounds like a great idea, but it only works if you gain your revenue from the industry. So let's say, for an example, I became a thought leader, an industry leader in the construction sector. I would, if I was trying to get consulting projects with developers outside of the construction industry, I would have no advantage over anybody else. I'd have no advantage. So industry leadership is where you influence people like yourself, marketing, VAs, coaches, those kind of people, industry influence or thought leadership, where the industry looks to you for insight, understanding, knowledge, all of that kind of stuff. But market leadership, or as we call it, expert authority, is where you're speaking to your customer base. So think of it like this. If I was the construction expert, do I want my industry, construction companies, to see me as the expert? Or do I want the people who hire construction companies to see me as the expert? Think about it like Martin Lewis. Martin Lewis, the money-saving expert. Who's he the expert to? He's not the expert to the financial services sector. He's the expert to consumers. Now, if he decided to do it the other way and tried to get respect from banks and building societies and all those people, he'd never have built the money-saving expert piece. Now, you may think that's obvious, Dean, and it is obvious. But when we start to build our personal brand, sometimes we miss this, and we look for and we seek to create our brand around being almost keeping up with the Joneses, with other people who do what we do. And we try to play one-upmanship to compete with them because we want to be seen as the leader or the most knowledgeable or the most valuable or what have you. But actually what we only need, if you're using it from a client perspective, your personal brand, is your clients to see you as the expert, which is a hell of a lot easier than trying to get your industry to see you as the expert. Because to qualify as an expert with your clients, you just have to know a lot, more than they do. You have to be able to solve their problems. You don't have to be able to solve your industry's problems, which are far more complex. So think of it, there's a difference between thought leadership. I know I've gone to the bottom point first. Thought leadership and market and industry leadership and market leadership. The benchmark of becoming that expert and building that brand is much lower when you're trying to reach out and use it from a client perspective than if you're trying to do it to get your industry to respect you and create that perception. So that's the first thing. You want to develop your authority. You want to be seen as the expert in your field. Yeah. You might want to build a speaking business. So a little tip on this one, if you want to speak at more conferences and you want to speak at more events, there's two elements to this. The first thing is, who do you need to build your personal brand with? And this again requires thought. You should be trying to establish your personal brand with the event hosts, not with the audience. Because at the end of the day, think about it. If you're trying to become a speaker at events and conferences and networking meetings and what have you, and you want to leverage your information, like your knowledge and expertise like that, your job is not to convince the audience, because the audience will be put in front of you. The event organizer has to be convinced that you're the best speaker to speak to their audience. not the audience convincing the speaker. The only time when an audience decides who the speaker is when you're a megastar and you can command a crowd. And then the event organizer brings you in because they believe you can bring a crowd. But outside of you being a crowd pulling speaker, what you've got to do is convince the event organizer, build your personal brand with event organizers to show that you are a great speaker. You are an engaging speaker. You will make their event. You will make their conference. You have got something valuable to say that their audience would love. You're actually trying to convince the event organizer, not the crowd. And so to become, and this is a fascinating thing about speaking businesses, to become that speaker, that expert in demand, it almost fulfills and builds your personal brand for you, because the more people you speak in front of, the more the audiences grow to like you, the more speakers like you, and it can propel itself. So building a speaking business not only can earn you a living from your personal brand, but it can actually help you grow your revenue, because it can help you put you in front of more customers. So one of my first points on here, I know I've come from the top and then come from the bottom and then gone straight to the top again. You want to grow your revenue. If you're seen by your customer base as the expert in demand, as I would say, they will want to work with you because you are the expert. You know what you're doing. You understand how to help them, and they trust that. And so they want to work with you. You've got a queue. Even if that queue's 3 people, it's still a queue. And then, of course, you want to sell on your expertise. If you've leveraged that personal brand to the point where your target audience see you as that expert, you can command a higher fee. And that's simple. Part of what you've got to do with your personal brand is, if you want to use it as a sales tool, you have to convince people that you are worth more. And how do you do that? Because you will either do something, there's a higher chance of success with you involved than without you. Everybody take note of that. There's a higher chance of success with you than without you. And the result becomes more certain, of course. And there'll be less problems and challenges if they've got the expert involved. And part of your personal brand is to convince people and create that message that people really see that if you're involved, 1, the outcome and the result becomes more certain, and 2, you will eliminate a lot of the pain and the mistakes and the stumbling along the way. So goals to do it: you want to grow revenue? Do you want to sell an expertise? Do you want to build a speaking business? Do you want to develop market authority? Which one is it? Because actually they all fit together, but I've seen so many people get really excited about getting speaking gigs, hoping that will make them a lot of money in the short term. But actually that's a more long-term thing. But if you do it, it works really well. When what they really needed to do was just develop some market authority. And actually the speaking business bit was a distraction, because their key priority is, I want to sell more stuff. I want to get more clients. So it's really important you define what's your primary objective from building your personal brand, so that you don't get disappointed, but also you don't pursue the wrong activities. So for an example, if you want to develop your market authority and you want to develop revenue, new clients, starting a speaking business may not necessarily be the quickest return on investment, because you might have to get booked for speaker events 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 18 months down the line. And so meanwhile, you've still got to do other things. So just bear in mind and make sure you write down and note down which is your key priority. I'll just flick to see. Jay, nice guy image. Let's have a look. I don't know what that means, Jay. Hopefully it's a compliment. So again, who's the audience? So when I did the Theaddy pitch earlier, I said target audience. Who are they? If you can't define them, you can't speak to them. You can't talk about what matters to them. You can't understand who they are. So what industries, what markets are they in? Are they customers? Are they future customers? And of course, importantly, what really matters to them? You remember we were talking about earlier about industry versus market leadership, and the difference between the two. Again, if you're looking to use this as to acquire customers, the personal brand to acquire customers, you want to make sure that the information that you put out there is not over their heads because you inadvertently talk to your industry. So let's say, for an example, I'm a marketing consultant, and actually I want to develop my expertise because I want to win more business. So I decide what I'm going to do is I'm going to build my industry expertise up in the hopes that it will convince customers to buy from me. And then as I start to share information, resources, white papers, I do a podcast, I go on social media, I build an email newsletter, I do all of these things, I inadvertently shoot my message right over their heads, and the people I want to influence think that they are the wrong people. So what I've got to do is really go, what about my message? What about my knowledge, my know-how, my expertise is valuable to my customers where they are right now? I remember many years ago, I watched a video by a guy called Brian Tracy. He's probably in his 90s now. He was very big in the business motivational scene in the 80s and 70s. And I watched a video about him, and his target audience is people who are struggling to plan, struggling to develop themselves personally. They're not very good at personal development. And one of the things he said was, you need a plan. So he said, get a piece of paper and write down 10 things you want to achieve, and just write it down. And the act of writing things down gives you the clarity and focuses your mind. And that simple concept blew me away at the time. Blew me away the way he said, just write it down, because if you've written it down, it's more likely to stick, and so you're going to progress on your goals a bit better. And actually, he was proven right. But if I'm a motivational coach or a motivational leader, and I'm listening to Brian Tracy, I go, that's a bit silly advice. It's a bit light. But for his target audience, it was bang on the money. For me, who was struggling to set goals and keep them, it was bang on the money at the time. So this is what I'm saying about what matters to the people you really want to influence is make sure that your message, make sure that what you're sharing is relevant to them, because you will know a lot more about your subject than they will. I always remember somebody said to me, make sure you never forget that you are the expert talking to a non-expert. You're the expert talking to a non-expert. So that's really important when you start to use your marketing efforts to establish this personal brand, is that you've got to give people something to work with, and it's got to be at their level, not your level. You're not writing or producing for yourself. You're producing for people who are operating at a lower level of knowledge, know-how, and expertise than you. And if they were operating at the same knowledge, know-how, and expertise as you, they wouldn't need you. They wouldn't need you. So think about it like that. Bring it down, make it easy to understand, make all the messaging clear and valuable for their target audience. And I know one person in the chat did a survey. One of the things I've done numerous times is I do polls and surveys on social media to really find out what's really going on. What are people really challenged with? What's going on? What they're struggling with? So I can make sure that whatever I'm sharing is helpful, valuable, and speaks to them at the people at the level that they're at and where they're at. So really, really important. I've got a couple more slides and then we'll do some Q&A if there is. Well, I've got one more slide or two more slides. So what matters to them is really important. So how can you add value to their world? What topics are they finding of interest that correlate with what you're trying to achieve? And just a reminder that actionable information. So this is really, really important. Giving people information generally is good, but where you get real brownie points from your audience is if you can give them something they can try or do. Now, there's only really two ways to help people plant a perception of you being the expert, the market leader, the go-to person. One is if you can give people a light bulb moment. In other words, you help people think differently about their challenges and problems and things like that. That's the first way. The second way is if you can give people something actionable they can do. People like to do, and if you can prompt them to try something and they see even a modest amount of success, it will elevate you in their world. You will rise in their perceptions just by giving them something actionable. Even if they only get a sliver of benefit, they got it, and they got it from you. So there's light bulb moments, getting people to think differently or opening their mind to a new idea or a new way of thinking. And there's giving some people something to do that helps them think better and think clearly. So those are really the two ways, the two types of information that will really unlock this personal brand for you. And then finally, where should you start? Where should you start? So I'm going to give you 4 tips and then we'll have some Q&A. So let me just switch back. So first things first, you need to choose a channel to build your personal brand. Now, I'm not talking about just about social media. It could be networking. It could be that you decide to go to a particular networking group and stick to it, so you're a regular face and you establish yourself there. It could be podcasting. There's another one. It could be, for an example, and I'm going to give you a practical tip in a minute, it could be social media. That could be another one. It could be virtual events, but you pick a channel where you can show up consistently in front of the right people. So you need to find where you're going to show up consistently. Is it a podcast? Is it social media? If so, which social media? Is it in-person events? But you find a place where you can push your message out, but also be seen, noticed for what you do. And then you consistently show up and share your ideas in that space where those people are that you want to influence. It could be an industry, a client industry event that you go to, but you need to consistently show up. So you need to think about, if I'm going to use this channel, can I consistently show up so I can land my message wherever that's going to be? Then you've got this point 3. Can you engage and interact with others who already have your audience? Are there other people, maybe further down the road than you, who can influence that, are already influencing that market, that you can network with, that you can engage with on social media, and so you can align with their audience and build out your own? And then 4th, what channels can you use to augment your primary method? So say, for an example, you were networking and you had a regular networking event you went to in person. How can you augment what you're doing in that primary channel, the networking event, with another channel to distribute your message so that you've got a secondary way to communicate with people? So in a networking event, it could be, for an example, just a real simple one, you could go to the networking event, and as you meet people and connect and get to know them at the networking event, you friend request them on Facebook. And so they see you on Facebook sharing bits and pieces as well, but they also see you at the networking event. So the networking event was your primary channel, but actually you're using Facebook to augment it. Now, if you're looking to use press and media, yeah, there's a really good website. Let me just find it. So it's called Harrow. And what it does, Harrow is called Help a Reporter. I'll put it in the comments. Harrow. And if you're looking, Help a Reporter, if you're looking to establish yourself in the market and you're looking to get more clients and all that kind of stuff, Harrow is a brilliant website where reporters, journalists ask for comment. So Harrow, journalists are asking for comment. They're asking for insights and help, and you can contribute and ask for their opinion. It's called Help a Reporter. And so they'll say, oh, we need somebody to give us some feedback on this, or we need something on this, or we need something on that. And you can contribute to journalistic reporting on lots of different topics. So Help a Reporter is a brilliant space where you can do that. I'm just going to pull that up. So Help a Reporter, brilliant little website. So if you're looking at going, actually, I want to get into the media, I want to use the media a little bit, that's a really good way to do it. And somebody said, that's exactly what I do. Yeah, so Help a Reporter is a brilliant platform to get yourself in front of different people. Somebody's just said that's exactly what I do, and I can't quite figure out who it was because they're on the streaming feed. It's hidden their name. But yeah, Help a Reporter is another way to get yourself in front of the media. So I've kind of finished what I was going to talk about. Are there any questions people want to ask? Any questions? Yeah, the media is quite a good one. I think the media one's quite cool. Anybody got any questions? No? We all quiet? So I'm just seeing if there's any more questions in the chat. No? Going once? Look, what I'd suggest to you to do, if there's no questions, we'll sign off. What I'd encourage you to do, watch this over again, look through the slides, and really kind of pin down and go, what do I want from this personal brand? What do I want from me out of this personal brand? And then you can start to map it out from there. Sometimes what we do is we get really excited about, oh, I could be in the press or I could build a podcast, but we don't really join it all up. So, okay, I'm in the podcast and that podcast is going to help me with X and Y, and I'll get to here and I'll get to there. So I'd encourage you to just plan this out before you start it, because it will make your life a lot easier. But Help a Reporter, brilliant little website if you want to feed into media stories and things that are going on in the world. Awesome. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. Just a reminder, the business support tool is on the Oxlep website. You can go and use that, answer some questions, and they will come back to you and show you this is what support's available, this is what programs are available, this is what resources are available to help you in your business and help it grow. So, and we will absolutely help you. Oxlep will help you grow your business and reach more audiences. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We've got more sessions coming up, so keep an eye on the Oxlep website, and we will see you again soon.